Stop scrolling right now. Drake's career just imploded on camera, and you're about to see the exact moment it happened. This footage is so devastating that industry insiders are calling it the most public meltdown in hip-hop history. What you're about to witness will change everything you thought you knew about this man. Everyone thought Drake would bounce back from the Kendrick battle, lay low for a minute, hit the studio, come back stronger. That was the narrative everybody was running with. But then, something absolutely insane happened. Drake went live on Twitch, and within minutes, he completely unraveled in real time. We're talking watering eyes, voice cracks, delusional statements that got him dragged across every platform imaginable. The internet watched a 40-year-old superstar have a full psychological breakdown, and they captured every single second of it. This isn't just about losing a rap battle anymore. This is about a man desperately trying to convince himself he still matters, while the entire world watches him fall apart. Let me break down exactly what happened, because this is where everything gets absolutely wild. Drake goes live, and immediately, he makes what might be the most delusional claim in modern hip-hop history. He looks dead into the camera and says, quote, "I'm one of the most profound writers of our time." The chat stopped moving, like literally froze for a second. Then it erupted. Somebody in the comments brutally destroyed him with one simple question. They typed, "Do you even know what the word profound means?" And then they posted the actual dictionary definition right there in the chat. Let me read this to you because it's important. Profound means having intellectual depth and insight, difficult to fathom or understand, characterized by intensity. The responses came flooding in like a tidal wave. One person said, "Drake isn't even the best writer in Toronto." Another comment read, "This is the funniest thing I've ever heard in my entire life." People started asking, "Name one profound thing Drake has ever rapped." Someone else chimed in with, "Tootsie Slide is profound now? LMAO." But here's where the footage gets legitimately disturbing. And I'm not exaggerating when I say disturbing. You can see Drake's eyes start watering, like actual moisture forming. His voice begins cracking multiple times throughout the stream. There are these long, painful pauses before he answers questions, like he's genuinely struggling to hold himself together. And then he starts giving this motivational speech that sounds exactly like someone who just survived a near-death experience and is trying to process the trauma. Listen to what he says, and I want you to really listen to these words because they reveal everything. He goes, "Life is about figuring it out. You might get bit by a snake. You might need a tourniquet. You gotta tie up your ankle yourself." Bro, what? The internet immediately noticed what was happening. One comment said, "This sounds like someone who fought for his life and lost." Another person wrote, "Kendrick turned Drake into a motivational speaker. That's absolutely insane." Multiple people pointed out that he's showing clear signs of trauma. The comments went absolutely feral at this point. People type in, "Yo, his eyes really watering, bro," with crying emojis. Voice cracking, talking about growth and setbacks. Kendrick broke this man. This is a cry for help disguised as confidence. He's literally telling us he's in pain and y'all laughing. And honestly, when you watch the footage with that perspective, it hits different. You start seeing a man who's genuinely hurt, genuinely struggling, and instead of taking time to heal privately, he's broadcasting his breakdown to thousands of people who are dissecting every micro expression. TMZ picked up on the stream almost immediately. They started running segments, analyzing Drake's body language. Fans online turned into full-blown investigators, slowing down frames, zooming into his facial expressions, comparing his demeanor now versus streams from 6 months ago. They're studying the pitch of his voice, the frequency of his blinks, the way his shoulders slump when certain topics come up. Online detectives are treating this like a forensic psychology case, and folks online swear they can pinpoint the exact moment during each stream when reality crashes back in and he remembers what Kendrick did to him. One body language expert on TikTok broke down a 30-second clip and pointed out 7 different stress indicators: the eye contact avoidance, the defensive hand gestures, the forced smile that doesn't reach his eyes, the way he touches his face repeatedly, which apparently signals discomfort and self-soothing behavior. This expert said, and I quote, "This is someone in active psychological distress trying to maintain a facade of confidence. The mask keeps slipping." And that video got like 2 million views in 24 hours because people can feel that something is off. The charisma that used to be effortless now feels performative and hollow. Now let's get into the motive and the deeper context, because this is where everything starts clicking into place and you realize this breakdown didn't just happen overnight. Drake's been dealing with some serious internal conflicts for a while now, and the Kendrick battle was just the catalyst that made everything explode to the surface. Think about the trajectory of his career. This man went from being the undisputed king of hip-hop, dropping back-to-back #1 albums, selling out arenas worldwide, to suddenly being questioned on every single metric. His cultural relevance, his writing ability, his authenticity, even his claim to being one of the greatest. All of that got challenged simultaneously and violently by one diss track. But it goes deeper than just the battle. Let's talk about the Lil Wayne situation, because this is something that's been haunting Drake for years, and it came up during the stream in the most uncomfortable way possible. Midstream, Drake says, quote, "I wouldn't be anything without Wayne." Now on the surface, that sounds like a humble acknowledgement of his mentor, but the chat immediately erupted because everybody knows the real history. They started spamming the truth that Drake doesn't want to confront. They exposed how Drake allegedly abandoned Wayne while he was in prison, how Drake made major power moves behind Wayne's back while Wayne was locked up and couldn't defend his position, how Drake then got Wayne's face tattooed on his arm afterward, which the internet interprets as a guilt-driven apology gesture. One comment summarized it perfectly. He stabbed Wayne in the back while he was in jail, then got his face tatted like a guilty criminal trying to apologize. That's conniving. And you know what Drake's face did when someone mentioned this in the chat? Dead silence. Pure guilt written all across his expression. He didn't defend himself, didn't laugh it off, just moved on to the next topic as fast as possible. That reaction told you everything. The internet knows what happened, and they're not letting him forget it. Every stream, someone brings it up. Every comment section, the Wayne betrayal gets mentioned. It's become this permanent stain that he can't scrub off no matter how many tribute posts he makes. Then there's the ghostwriting situation, which is probably the most sensitive nerve you can touch. And during this stream, somebody went directly for it. They typed in chat, "Shout out to Quentin Miller and Party Next Door, the real writers." Bro, Drake got defensive so fast, like immediately his whole energy shifted. He snapped back, "You think he writes for me? He can't even pronounce English words." The chat went nuclear. People typing, "If you really wrote your own stuff, you wouldn't be this pressed. Profound writers don't need to convince people they're profound. The fact you're arguing about this on Twitch is proof you're insecure. No one's dissecting Certified Lover Boy in college classrooms, bro." And that last comment hits at the core of Drake's identity crisis. He wants to be seen as a serious artist, a lyrical heavyweight, someone whose work will be studied and respected decades from now. But the public perception is that he makes catchy pop rap, relies heavily on collaborators, and his deepest bars are about relationship drama. There's nothing wrong with that lane, but it's not profound. It's not Kendrick-level introspection. It's not Nas's storytelling. It's not Jay-Z's business acumen mixed with street wisdom. It's Drake. And for the first time in his career, being Drake isn't enough for him anymore. He wants the respect that comes with being considered a top-tier writer, but he hasn't put in the body of work that earns that title. So when the internet challenges him on it, he crumbles, because deep down, he knows they're right. Let's also talk about the Iceman situation, because this is where things get really calculated and kind of sad. For months, everyone knew Drake's Iceman nickname was a reference to the Top Gun character Iceman. It was obvious that's where it came from. But on this stream, Drake suddenly tried to rewrite history. He claimed out of nowhere that it was actually about basketball player George Iceman Gervin. The internet didn't buy it for a single second. Comments flooded in, "Bro, you ain't slick. We all know who you meant originally." This is proof he reads the hate comments and it bothers him. Now he's trying to rebrand in real time. This is embarrassing. Body language experts weighed in again, saying this is classic damage control. He's scrambling to rewrite his own narrative because the original story made him look weak. The desperation is palpable, visible. You can see a man in real time trying to reshape public perception of himself, trying to patch up the holes in his legacy before they become permanent. But the internet has receipts. They have screenshots, old interviews, archived tweets. You can't just retcon your own mythology when millions of people have been documenting your every move for 15 years. That kind of revisionist history doesn't work anymore. And the fact that he's even attempting it shows how rattled he is, how much the criticism has gotten under his skin, how badly he needs to be seen differently than the world currently sees him. But here's the part that really hits different and makes this whole situation feel less like entertainment and more like watching someone genuinely suffer. Throughout these streams, you're not just seeing a celebrity get roasted, you're watching a human being process rejection and humiliation in real time, while thousands of people mock him. And as much as the internet loves to pile on, there's something deeply uncomfortable about it when you really sit with it. Drake has spent nearly 2 decades building this image of invincibility, the guy who always wins, the guy who turns losses into comebacks, the guy who can brush off any diss, any criticism, any challenge. That persona is what made him a superstar. But now that armor is cracked, and we're seeing what's underneath. And what's underneath is someone who's hurt, someone who's confused about why the world turned on him so fast, someone who genuinely believed his own hype and is now facing the reality that maybe he wasn't as untouchable as he thought. There's this moment during one stream where someone asks him about his legacy and he pauses, like a long pause, at least 10 seconds of just silence. And you can see him trying to formulate an answer that sounds confident, but his face is doing something completely different. His jaw tightens, his eyes shift down, he takes a breath that's just slightly too deep. And when he finally speaks, his voice has this almost pleading quality to it. He's not talking to the chat anymore, he's talking to himself, trying to convince himself that everything he built still matters, that the empire isn't crumbling, that he's still the same Drake who dominated the 2010s. The comments during that pause were brutal. He don't even believe himself. This is what defeat looks like. Kendrick killed this man's soul. I almost feel bad for him. Almost. And that last comment captures the weird tension of this whole thing. Because on one hand, this is a multi-millionaire superstar who's had an incredible career and will be fine financially. But on the other hand, you're watching someone's sense of identity and purpose disintegrate publicly. Fame doesn't make you immune to pain. Success doesn't erase insecurity. And right now, Drake is experiencing both in HD for the whole world to see. What makes it even more tragic is that he keeps coming back. He said after the Kendrick battle that he was done streaming, that he needed to step away, that he was focusing on music. But then a week later, he's back live, and then again, and again. It's like he can't help himself. He's addicted to the validation, to the attention, even when that attention is mostly negative now. He needs to be seen. He needs to defend himself. He needs to prove something to people who have already made up their minds. And every time he goes live, he just gives the internet more ammunition, more clips to dissect, more moments of vulnerability to mock. It's a cycle he can't break, and honestly, it's painful to watch. Now let's get into the second wave of evidence, because what happened next is absolutely diabolical and shows just how calculated this whole streaming situation has become. Drake didn't just randomly start showing up on Twitch out of nowhere. There's a strategy behind it. And when you look at who he's streaming with and what he's giving them, the whole thing starts to look less like genuine friendship and more like a desperate attempt to buy loyalty and relevance in a space where he's losing ground fast. Here's what we know. Drake gifted Ben the Don a Bentley. Not a shout-out, not a collaboration opportunity, a whole Bentley. That's a 6-figure car just handed over. And this isn't an isolated incident. He's been showering streamers with expensive gifts, popping up in their chats with massive donations, sending them designer clothes, jewelry, you name it. On the surface, it looks like generosity. But when you zoom out and look at the context, it looks like something else entirely. It looks like a man who's trying to create a new ecosystem of support because his traditional media relationships have collapsed. Industry insiders started talking about this, and what they revealed is pretty damning. One person who works in music marketing said, quote, "This is a transactional relationship. He's buying influence because his organic fan base is collapsing. He needs streamers to survive his next album rollout because he has no other options right now." Another insider added, traditional media isn't defending him anymore. The blogs aren't running puff pieces, the magazines aren't putting him on covers. He's radioactive in the industry right now, so he's pivoting to gaming and streaming culture where the audience is younger and might not care as much about the Kendrick situation. The comments figured this out immediately. People typing, "He's buying people so they won't turn on him when the next album drops." This is what you do when you're desperate for relevance. He's creating debt so people feel obligated to defend him. And that last point is key. When you give someone a Bentley, they're not going to turn around and criticize you publicly. They're financially and socially invested in your success now. It's a smart move from a strategic standpoint, but it's also incredibly transparent. The internet sees exactly what's happening. He's building a paid army of influencers who will hype his music regardless of quality because they're on the payroll. And then there's the optics of how he's showing up on these streams, which might be even more embarrassing than the money he's spending. Drake and one of the streamers he was gaming with showed up in matching outfits, like full-on twinning, coordinated fits. The internet absolutely lost it. Comments poured in. A 40-year-old man wearing matching fits with a streamer? This is what rock bottom looks like. From stadium tours to Twitch twinsies. Kendrick really did this to him. The ridicule was immediate and merciless. Because here's the thing. When you're at the top of your game, when you're culturally dominant, you don't need to try this hard. You don't need to match outfits with streamers for content. You don't need to gift Bentleys to 20-somethings to stay relevant. You just are relevant. Your music speaks for itself. Your presence speaks for itself. But when you're slipping, when you're losing your grip on the culture, you start making moves like this. Desperate moves, visible moves, moves that scream, "Please pay attention to me," instead of commanding attention naturally. Let's also talk about the timing of all this because it's suspiciously convenient. Drake's next album rollout is supposedly coming soon, and conveniently, he's suddenly everywhere on Twitch, building relationships with streamers who have millions of young followers, streamers who can push his music to an audience that might not be tuned in to traditional hip-hop media. It's calculated, it's strategic, but it's also sad because it shows that he doesn't trust his music to speak for itself anymore. He's laying the groundwork, building the infrastructure, making sure there's a network of people who are obligated to promote him when the time comes. One media analyst broke it down like this. Drake is doing what a lot of legacy artists do when they feel themselves aging out of relevance. They pivot to adjacent cultures, try to embed themselves in new communities and hope that association keeps them cool. It worked for Travis Scott with gaming, it worked for Post Malone with streaming, but the difference is those guys did it authentically. They were genuinely into that culture. Drake feels like a tourist. He feels like someone who's only there because his original home doesn't want him anymore. And that's the tragedy of this whole situation. Drake used to set trends. Now he's desperately chasing them. He used to be the culture. Now he's trying to buy his way back into it. The streamers know it, the audience knows it, and most importantly, Drake knows it. You can see it in his eyes during these streams. There's this underlying awareness that he's not operating from a position of power anymore. He's operating from a position of need, and everyone can sense it.
Now, this whole situation gets even crazier when you realize how the broader hip-hop community is responding to Drake's streaming era. Because it's not just fans roasting him, it's other artists, producers, industry veterans, people who used to ride with him who are now quietly distancing themselves or straight up joining the pylon. The shift in energy is massive. There was a moment a few weeks ago where a prominent producer, someone who's worked with Drake multiple times in the past, went on a podcast and was asked about Drake's current state. And instead of defending him or deflecting, this producer said something wild. He said, quote, "Sometimes you gotta let a man sit with his losses. Not every L needs to be spun into a comeback story immediately. Maybe this is a learning moment." The host was shocked. The audience was shocked because this is someone who's financially benefited from Drake's success, basically saying, he needs to take this L and reflect. And that sentiment is spreading. Other artists who used to collaborate with Drake aren't posting him anymore, aren't defending him on social media, aren't rushing to his side during this vulnerable moment. The silence is loud. And hip-hop loyalty is everything. When someone's getting attacked, the real ones show up. They post a picture, drop a supportive comment, remind everyone of that person's legacy. But for Drake right now, crickets. That tells you everything about how the industry really feels about him. He might have been commercially successful, but he didn't build those deep bonds. He didn't cultivate that genuine loyalty. And now when he needs it most, there's nobody riding for him. Meanwhile, Kendrick is out here living his best life. He's performing to sold-out crowds, he's getting universal critical acclaim, he's being called one of the greatest to ever do it. The contrast couldn't be more stark. One man is at the absolute peak of his artistic powers and cultural influence. The other is on Twitch having emotional breakdowns and trying to explain what the word profound means. It's like watching two completely different career trajectories play out in real time. Let's also talk about Drake's team, because there's been some interesting rumors about what's happening behind the scenes. Multiple sources have said that people in Drake's camp are concerned, like genuinely worried about his mental state and the decisions he's making. Allegedly, there were conversations about whether these Twitch streams are a good idea, whether he should take a longer break from the public eye, whether he should work with a PR crisis team to reshape the narrative. But apparently, Drake's not listening. He's insisting on doing things his way, on being visible, on defending himself publicly. And his team is watching nervously as he continues to give the internet more content to roast him with. One anonymous source close to the situation told a gossip blog, he's not in a headspace to receive criticism right now, even from people who care about him. He's convinced that if he just explains himself enough, if he just shows up enough, people will come around. But that's not how this works. Sometimes the best move is to disappear for a while and let people miss you. He's doing the opposite. And honestly, that tracks with everything we're seeing. The man is in active self-destruction mode, and everyone around him could see it, except him. There's also been talk about his upcoming album and whether the label is nervous about its commercial performance. Because here's the reality. Drake's last few projects haven't had the cultural impact of his earlier work. The streaming numbers are still good because he has a massive fan base, but the conversation around the music has shifted. People aren't calling his recent albums classics. They're not getting the universal praise he's used to. And now, with the Kendrick situation hanging over everything, there's real concern about whether his next project will be received well or whether it'll be torn apart before people even listen to it. The industry is watching closely. Betting odds are being placed, not officially, obviously, but in group chats and boardrooms across the music business. Will Drake bounce back? Will this album be his redemption? Or will it be the final nail in the coffin of his claim to being one of the greatest? The stakes have never been higher for him. And based on how he's moving right now, based on these streams and these desperate plays for relevance, a lot of people are betting against him. Not because they hate him, but because the trajectory is pointing in one clear direction: downward.
What we're seeing here is way bigger than just Drake having a bad year. This is about what happens when you build your entire identity around being number one, and then suddenly you're not anymore. It's about what happens when the validation you've been addicted to for 15 years gets ripped away. It's about the psychological cost of fame and how we as a culture watch people crumble and call it entertainment. The bigger conversation we need to have is about responsibility. Not just Drake's responsibility to handle his platform better, but our responsibility as an audience. Because every time he goes live and has a breakdown, we're watching, we're screen recording, we're making memes, we're quote tweeting the most painful moments, we're turning someone's genuine suffering into content. And yeah, he's a celebrity. Yeah, he chose this life. But does that mean he deserves to be psychologically tormented by millions of people for entertainment? There's a dark side to internet culture that we don't talk about enough. The way we collectively decide someone is done and then spend months proving ourselves right. The way we create echo chambers where every action that person takes gets interpreted in the worst possible light. The way we remove their humanity and turn them into a character in a story we're all writing together. Drake has become that character. He's no longer a person with feelings and vulnerabilities. He's a meme. He's content. He's something to laugh at. And this pattern isn't new. We've seen it happen to other celebrities. We watched Britney Spears have a public breakdown and we mocked her. We watched Amanda Bynes struggle with mental health and we made jokes. We watched Kanye West spiral and we called him crazy instead of concerned. We have this cycle where we build people up, worship them, then tear them down the second they show weakness. And social media has accelerated that cycle to a terrifying degree. Drake's situation is a warning for anyone who's building their life around public validation. The more you tie your self-worth to what strangers think of you, the more vulnerable you become when that opinion shifts. And it will shift. The internet is fickle. The culture moves fast. What's cool today is corny tomorrow. What's praised this year is criticized the next. If you don't have a solid sense of self that exists independent of public perception, you will crumble the moment the tide turns. And that's exactly what we're watching happen. The responsibility also falls on platforms. Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. They profit off this content. They profit off the drama, the breakdowns, the pylons. Their algorithms boost conflict because conflict drives engagement. So when Drake goes live and has a vulnerable moment, the algorithm makes sure millions of people see it. When someone makes a harsh comment, the algorithm surfaces it to the top. These platforms are designed to amplify our worst impulses and monetize human suffering. And we're all complicit because we keep clicking, keep watching, keep engaging. So where does this end? Does Drake eventually get help? Does he take a real break from the public eye? Does he come back stronger? Or does this spiral continue until something really bad happens? Because that's the scary part. We've seen how these stories can end. We've seen celebrities reach breaking points that result in tragedy. And every time it happens, we collectively say, we should have seen the signs, and we should have been kinder. But then the next person starts struggling, and we do the exact same thing all over again.
Let's be brutally honest about where Drake is right now and where this is heading. This isn't just a rough patch. This isn't a temporary setback that he'll bounce back from with a hit single. This is a fundamental shift in how he's perceived culturally, and those shifts are almost impossible to reverse. Once the internet decides you're finished, you're finished. The narrative is set. Everything you do from that point forward gets filtered through that narrative. Drake called himself profound. The internet laughed and will never let him forget it. He gave a motivational speech with watering eyes. Everyone noticed the pain and turned it into memes. He tried to rebrand his Iceman persona. Nobody believed it, and it made him look more desperate. He's buying streamer loyalty with Bentleys. The desperation is obvious to everyone watching. He betrayed Lil Wayne years ago. The guilt is still haunting him, and the internet won't let it go. The ghostwriting accusations resurface constantly. He's still defensive, which makes him look guilty. Every single move he makes right now is being interpreted as weakness, as desperation, as a man scrambling to hold onto relevance that's slipping through his fingers. And the tragic part is, the more he tries to fight it, the worse it gets. Every stream is more evidence. Every defensive comment is more ammunition. Every calculated attempt to buy his way back into cool just makes him look more pathetic. So what happens next? Best case scenario, he disappears for a while, takes a real break, works on himself privately, comes back in a year or two with music that's so undeniable that it forces the narrative to shift. But based on his current behavior, that seems unlikely. He's addicted to the attention. He can't stay away. He needs to be seen and heard and validated, even when that validation is mostly negative now. Worst case scenario, he continues this spiral, keeps streaming, keeps defending himself, keeps making desperate moves that backfire. The album drops and it gets torn apart regardless of quality because everyone's already decided it's going to be bad. His sales drop, his streaming numbers decline, other artists start openly disrespecting him. The legacy he spent 15 years building gets completely rewritten as he was good for a while, but the Kendrick battle exposed him and he never recovered. And here's the thing that nobody wants to say out loud, but everyone's thinking. This might actually be the end of Drake as we knew him. Not the end of his career necessarily. He'll still make music, still have fans, still make money, but the end of Drake as a dominant cultural force. The end of Drake as someone whose opinion matters in hip-hop. The end of Drake as someone whose trends and tastemaker, that version of Drake, might actually be gone forever. And what we're watching in these streams is him realizing that in real time and not knowing how to process it. Kendrick didn't just beat him in a rap battle. He destroyed his entire sense of self. He took away the one thing Drake has built his identity around for 2 decades. Being the best, being number one, being untouchable. All of that is gone now, and Drake is left with a question he's never had to answer before. Who am I if I'm not the guy at the top? Who am I if the world doesn't love me anymore? Who am I when the validation stops? And he doesn't have an answer. That's why his eyes are watering on stream. That's why his voice keeps cracking. That's why he's giving speeches about snake bites and tourniquets. He's trying to find meaning in the loss, trying to convince himself this is a growth moment. But deep down, he knows the truth. This isn't a chapter in his comeback story. This is the beginning of the end.
So there it is, the complete breakdown of how Drake went from the biggest rapper in the world to having public emotional meltdowns on Twitch while the entire internet watches and laughs. This isn't just about music anymore. This is about watching someone's psychological collapse in real time and the uncomfortable questions that raises about all of us. The question now is whether Drake will ever recover from this. Not financially, he'll be fine, but mentally? Culturally? Artistically? Can you come back from this level of public humiliation and mockery? History says it's possible, but extremely rare. And based on his current trajectory, based on how he's moving right now, it doesn't look good. Every stream is another chance for the internet to tear him apart. Every defensive comment is more evidence of his fragility. Every attempt to buy relevance through Twitch streamers just makes the desperation more obvious. The hole keeps getting deeper and he keeps digging. At some point, someone in his life needs to physically take his phone away and force him to log off, because this isn't helping. This is making everything exponentially worse. But here's what I want to know from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Do you actually believe Drake is a profound writer, or is this the most delusional thing you've ever heard from a major artist? Do you think he can recover from this Kendrick situation, or is his legacy permanently damaged? And be honest, when you watch these stream clips of him tearing up and getting defensive, do you feel bad for him, or do you think he brought this on himself? This story is far from over. More streams are coming. More awkward moments are gonna be captured and dissected. The album rollout is approaching, and that's gonna be wild to watch. Reports are saying Drake's team is nervous. Insiders are leaking that he's not handling this well privately either. The internet is sharpening their knives, waiting for the next vulnerability to attack. This is gonna get messier before it gets better. So make sure you're subscribed and notifications are turned on, because we're covering every single development as this situation unfolds. Every stream, every breakdown, every desperate attempt to stay relevant, every comment from other artists, every industry rumor, all of it. Hit that like button if this video gave you a perspective you hadn't considered before, and share this with anyone who's been following the Drake situation, because this is the most comprehensive breakdown of what's actually happening psychologically. I appreciate you for watching all the way to the end. This was a long one, but it needed to be, because this story is complex and layered and disturbing in ways that most coverage isn't addressing. Stay safe out there. Remember that celebrities are human beings, regardless of their wealth and fame, and maybe think twice before you add to the pile-on next time someone's clearly struggling. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.